Hello students, this is Dr. Bijendra Jha and today we will talk about what is the role of India's diaspora in making and shaping of India's foreign policy. So let me begin with, what is Indian diaspora? How we can define Indian diaspora? Now if you look at the Ministry of External Affairs, talk about Indian diaspora in three terminology. Indian diaspora, right? Now, the Indian people who have already migrated, right, to the other countries of the world, they are called Indian diaspora. Now, if you look at, our history, Indian people are migrating, right, from antiquity, from ancient time. Look at the time of, Buddhism, when many people from India traveled to other states like Southeast Asia to spread Buddhism, right? So if you look at Indian diaspora means Indians who have migrated to other country for different regions. Now, if you look at this Indian diaspora, there are three category. One category is called NRI. NRI means non-resident Indians. They have Indian citizenship, but they have migrated to different country for different purpose. Some people have migrated to US for business, for education, or for the work, and so on. So one is category is called NRI, right? And another category is called PIO, persons of Indian origin. What do you mean by persons of Indian origin? It means they are citizen of other countries, but their ancestors have actually had migrated from India to that country. Now I told you that from history, Indians have been migrating from India to different part of the world. So you have PIO, right? And many people are basically third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation of migrants. So they are actually persons of Indian origin, right? Now they are citizens of other country, but their forefather have migrated from India to other country. Now another is basically OCI, right? Overseas citizen of India. What is overseas citizen of India? No, they are also migrant, but they migrate, very much early, like for example in 19th century, 18th century or early, but they availing some citizenship with, right, India. So they also hold Indian citizenship. Later on, if you look at, both have been merged, right? And then there is only one category that called OCI, overseas citizen of India. So if you look at, there are two categories of Indian diaspora, NRI and OCI. This has been merged in 2015. So I hope you got what is Indian diaspora, right? And if you look at the numbers of Indian diaspora who have been migrated to different part of the world, now this number is 35 millions, right? So India has 35 millions, a strong diaspora in different parts of the world, right? And they are contributing in India's economy, India's soft power, then also technology and politically and strategically, right? So that is actually we have Indian diaspora. Now let me begin the ages through which the Indian diaspora has migrated to other country. So we can divide into three time zone. One is ancient era. Now ancient era, you must be knowing that Indians are migrating for different regions to the different part of the world for business, for spreading religion, and so on and so forth. Now look at the Southeast Asia, right, and Japan, all and China, they all are actually Buddhist country. And during, due to the spreading of Buddhism, people have migrated from India to different part of the world. So if you look at, so this is ancient era where people migrated from India to other countries. Now second is colonial era, or you say British era. British era. Now if you look at when slavery was actually prohibited, banned around 1830s, right? Then if you look at British needed labor to engage in agricultural work like tea plantation. So what happened? Indians have been brought to different part of the world from India. So for example, if you look at Tamil has been brought, now Tamil has been, migrated to Sri Lanka. Now if you look at, the west, from people from western Bihar, UP, Odisha, right, uh, and other Kerala, they have migrated in different part of the world, right? So in British era, right, people migrated, right, and they are called indentured labor. Indentured labor. Now if you look at British brought Indian labor to different part of the world like Caribbean countries, like Sri Lanka, as I mentioned already, then Africa, then Pacific regions like Fiji, right? So in British era people had migrated, right? Now third migration, if you look at, that is post independent India. Now if you look at after 1947, right, migration was little different than the earlier, right? Now if you look at in post independent India, the migration largely took place, right, of middle class, right, or rich. They had migrated for different region, for example for education, for business, for trade, for so and so on, and they have migrated towards US, Europe, right, Europe, Australia, Japan, right, and so on. But however, they also migrated to Southeast Asia. They migrated to Singapore, right? They migrated to, African countries. They migrated to West Asia. So there are migrations in post-independent India. And according to World Migration Report 2020, if you look at World migration report, right, 2020. According to this report, Indians are actually largest migrator in the world. So Indians are migrating to the other country. Now question is, now what is the role of this Indian diaspora? Right? Now come to the, let me give you an example. Look at the Israeli diaspora. Israeli diaspora. Israeli diaspora are making a very significant role in shaping, the Israeli foreign policy and also the foreign policy of other country. Let's say foreign policy of, France, or foreign policy of US, foreign policy of UK, and so forth. Right? Now look at China's diaspora. China's diaspora. China's diaspora also had helped in the emergence of China as a economic power, right? Now, do we have such diaspora? right? Now, before we go into such examination, let me talk about what policy Indian government had adopted towards diaspora. So, if you look at Indian government policy, Indian government policy towards diaspora, right? Towards diaspora. Here I will talk, about Indian policy towards the diaspora Prime Minister wise. Now let me talk about the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru policy towards diaspora was basically active disassociation. It is described as active disassociation. What does it mean? Active disassociation. What does it mean? Nehru believed that if Indians are living abroad, right, and already received citizenship of that country, then they should be loyal to that country, right? Their affairs is not Indian affairs, right? They should, you know, perform the duty as well as assert rights because they are citizen of that country. So India has nothing to do with diaspora living abroad, right? So if you look at Jawaharlal Nehru followed active disassociation, and if you look at the other prime minister who followed Nehru like Lal Bahadur Shastri or Indira Gandhi, they followed the same policy, right? What is that policy? Active disassociation. Now let me tell you, when there was a crisis in Eastern Africa, there was a brutality and violence on Indians in Eastern African countries. Indira Gandhi was heavily criticized, right? So what happened? If you look at the other next foreign policy who brought certain changes, and that was Rajiv Gandhi. Now, in Rajiv Gandhi, if you look at his policy towards diaspora is known as basically era of importance. Era of importance. Now, how we can say that Rajiv Gandhi policy towards diaspora was an era of importance? Let me give you few example. First, he established the Indian Overseas Department. He established Indian Overseas Department, right? Second, if you look at, he appointed Sam Pitroda to connect with Indian diaspora in the US. I hope you know the Sam Pitroda, right? So he appointed Sam Pitroda to connect with Indian diaspora, right? Now, third example I can give you that when there was a crisis in Fiji and Indian, supported government was ousted. Now Rajiv Gandhi raised voice at United Nations and supported, you know, the Fiji ousted government, right, or government that was ousted in Fiji, right? So basically, India's support for Fiji, for Indians in Fiji, right? So if you look at the earlier prime minister who had not given importance to the Indian diaspora, now the importance has been given. So Indian government started, giving importance to Indian diaspora. Now, if you look at the other prime minister like Narasimha Rao, right? I'm writing An Rao, or right, or actually Devagowda or Gujaral followed the same policy. Now, if you look at the changes came when Atal Bihari Vajpayee became the Prime Minister of India. So here, if you look at Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, right? Now, it is called, you can say that, era of association. Era of association. Now, India actively started, engaging with diaspora. Let me give you two examples. First, India amended Citizenship Act. So, Citizenship Act, right? And in 2023, 2003, not 23, 2003, right? So, Citizenship Amendment Act, and basically the dual citizenship had been given to the, diaspora. Now, second, if you look at, he also started organizing Pravasiya Bharatiya Divas every year, right? So he also organized Pravasiya Pravasiya Bharatiya Divas, right? Now, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee started calling Indian living abroad to come India and contribute in India's economic growth, right? So this is actually the era of association. And if you look at the other prime minister like Manmohan Singh, right, followed the same method, that is association. Pravasi Bharati, Divas was remain continued in India, and of course citizenship was given to those Indian diaspora who were living outside, abroad, in different part of the world. Now come to the Modi ji, right? Narendra Modi, right? Now it is called, era of active association. Era of active association. Now what does it mean? Now wherever Modi ji goes, he addresses Indian diaspora. Now look at in 2014, right? He addressed 20,000 Indian in Madison Square, US, right? Modi ji addressed 20,000 Indians, right? Indians at Madison Square, US. And then thereafter, if you look at wherever Modi ji goes, he addresses Indian diaspora. Whether he goes to Australia or European country or US or Malaysia or African countries, he addresses diaspora. So diaspora is basically a special masala, right? A special recipe of Modi's foreign policy. Now, if you look at Modi ji has actually focused on 5D. He focused on 5D. What are those 5D? The first is demography, right? Second is development. Third is demography done, democracy. Fourth is diplomacy. And fifth is diaspora. So diaspora had been remain significant from Modi's perspective. Now, if you look at diaspora, right, it has become very important for India's foreign policy, and they play a very significant role in a foreign policy of other country. So if you look at Narendra Modi era, it is era of active association. So look at things have changed from active disassociation to the era of active association, right? Modi ji called diaspora as एम्बेसडर ऑफ इंडिया, राष्ट्रदूत. वो भारत के राष्ट्रदूत हैं, राइट? वो भारत के राष्ट्रदूत हैं. Diaspora actually is India's ambassador, brand ambassador, propagating India's art, culture, yoga, cuisine, right? And also exporting India's soft power. So we have discussed India's policy towards diaspora. Now come to the role of India's diaspora. Role of Indian diaspora. Now if you look at the role of Indian diaspora, right, and their significance, first if you look at political role. Now if you look at Indians, right, I told you already we have 35 millions a strong diaspora living in different part of the world. And if you look at, they are very important, they are very strong, they are strong in economy, they are politically influenced, and in some of the country they have become prime minister, right? Let me talk about Mauritius, let me talk about Fiji, let me talk about Rishi Sunak of UK. Now if you look at Kamala Harris, right, the previous government where the Biden was the president, Kamala Harris was the vice president. So if you look at the political role, diaspora is helping to make India's foreign policy more softer towards India. So if you look at, the diaspora is playing a vital role in shaping foreign policy of others towards India. Now let me give you example of India-US nuclear deal. India-US nuclear deal, right? Now if you look at that, concluded in 2005, and diaspora played a very important role, right? Now look at how the foreign policy of EU or US, however, due to the Trump tariff game, the foreign policy of US towards India become very difficult, very irritating, of course, but it will get settled down very soon. Don't worry, right? So if you look at political role is very important, right? The opinion of the political elite of any country, right, has very soft corner towards India's foreign policy. So look at the political, the Indian diaspora plays a very vital role in shaping the foreign policy of other country. At the same time, India's foreign policy is also replicated in the same way, right? Now come to the another point. Let me talk about, look at the economic role, the economic significance. Economic significance. Now you know, look at investment. India is receiving investment from abroad by the Indians, right? So investment is growing over the period of time, right? And that investment is coming from either diaspora or through the influence of diaspora in different countries and different part of the world. Second, if you look at remittance, Now I'm giving you the recent data in 2025, 24, not 25, 24. India received approximately $135 million, right? That constitute 3.5% of India's GDP, right? Now, if you look at the remittance, it is one of the highest in the world, right? Now, if you look at the economic significance, now if you see the Indians who are actually emerged as a businessman, right, or in different part of the world, and they are inviting Indians to come and join it. So basically they are also increasing economic employment opportunity employment opportunities throughout the world, right? One more, if you look at the technology, it is true that there is a brain drain. There was a hue and cry that Indians, especially the educated Indians, are going out. But let me tell you, they are also coming back to India, and they are bringing lots of technology in India. They are investing in India, right? And in that way, they are contributing in India's economic growth. So you can say that reverse brain drain, right? Reverse brain drain, and that bringing technology in India, technology transfer in India. Now, if you look at one scholar, his name is Devesh Kapoor. Devesh Kapoor has argued that Indian diaspora has played a very vital role in bringing investment, in bringing technology, and also contributing in India's economic growth. Right now, come to the another culture point of view. Cultural significance. Cultural significance. Now, I told you that there are 35 millions Indian diaspora living in different part of the world, right? And highest diaspora we have today in US, right? Approximately 5.5 million. Approximately, I'm talking about, not exact data, right? After US, we have in UAE, right? And then we have in Malaysia, right? And where you can say that there is no Indians. There are Indians in of almost every country of the world except Afghanistan or Pakistan. We don't have Indian diaspora in that country. Otherwise, if you look at the continent wise, African continent, South American, North American, Europe, Australia, Oceania, everywhere you can find Indians, and they are very, very important in that country, economically and politically, and they are contributing in India. So look at the cultural, right? The diaspora are basically interested to India's culture. Like look at the dance, right? Art. Then if you look at music, then food, then painting, then yoga, right? So if you look at the Indian diaspora, they are propagating India's culture abroad, right? And in this way, diaspora is exporting India's soft power, right? Now they are very vital in exporting India's soft power, right? Now there, if you look at, we have ICCR. This is an independent body under the Ministry of External Affairs, ICCR stands for Indian Council of Cultural Relation. Indian Council of Cultural Relations. Basically, this ICCR, right, interact with diaspora, right, and it promotes Indian culture like Bollywood movie, like theater, dance, art, yoga, cuisine, right? And so on and so forth. Indian civilizational value. And a diaspora is a consumer of these things, right? And they are not only consumer, they are also propagating such values, Indian values in different part of the world. And in that way, they are actually making positive impact on India's foreign policy, right? So if you look at, there is a cultural significance of India's diaspora. Now, it is not that everything is good with Indian diaspora. Now, let me tell you the challenges of Indian diaspora. Challenges of Indian diaspora. What are the major challenges of Indian diaspora? The first challenges is, if you look at, you know, they are actually heterogeneous. They are not homogeneous. So basically, they are heterogeneous group, right? Now, if you look at the West Asia, we have diaspora towards the West Asia, but they are actually low income grade, basically working people. However, right? However, there are businessmen, there are intellectuals who are working in West Asia. First, mostly, if you look at Indian diaspora, they are actually working in different capacity in Western Asian country like Saudi Arabia or UAE, right? They are involved in construction work, building roads, railways, port, build, and other things. So basically, this diaspora is basically, you can say that low income group, right? Income group. Now, let me tell you, they are involved in the construction of, for the different constructions in West Asia. But once the constructions is over in Western Asia, they will return back to India. They will return back to India. And it will be huge challenge for the Indian market to create job employment for them, right? Now, secondly, if you look at, since they are low income group, they are also demand welfare policies from India, right? And India has made such policy. For example, there is an insurance scheme for diaspora, right? Now, second is, if you look at, it is a age of deglobalization, deglobalization, or I can say that reverse globalization, right? Now, in the deglobalization, Indians are facing discrimination in every other, in several part of the world. Now, if you look at, due to the anti-India sentiment, Indians are basically, you know, facing violence. Look at Australia, what happens there. Indians are facing violence. Now look at what happened in US, how Indians are brought, actually sent back to India, right? And that was a problem, right? So deglobalization or anti-India problem, right? Now third, if you look at, India has no uniform diaspora policy. India lacks India lacks uniform diaspora policy, right? Right? And this is why basically there is a problem in dealing with diaspora. As I told you that West Asia has a diaspora which is low income group, but on the other hand, if you look at diaspora in US, diaspora in Japan, diaspora in European country, diaspora in Britain, diaspora in Australia, they are very rich, right? So we have different kind of diaspora, right? And having a good policies on diaspora, that would be good to India, right? Now recently there is a parliamentary standing committee, parliamentary standing committee, right, submitted a report on Indian diaspora, submitted a report on Indian diaspora. Now they demanded to have, broader diaspora policy towards, the Indian people living abroad, and this was headed by Shashi Tharoor, basically Shashi Tharoor. And if you look at Shashi Tharoor, right, Shashi Tharoor has argued that Indian diaspora has played a very significant role, right, to boost India's soft power, right, the idea of peace, non-violence, and yoga globally, right? So there is a, if you look at Indian diaspora, right, it is a huge 35 million diaspora living in different part of the world, and I have already explained that they have left India in different time period for different region. Then I also talked about, the India's policy towards diaspora, Indian diaspora. We have seen Prime Minister Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri, and Indira Gandhi. They followed active dissociation. Then we have seen Rajiv Gandhi, who had given importance to Indian diaspora. And then later on, Prime Minister P.B. Narasimha Rao, actually Devagowda, and I.K. Gujral followed it. But Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to power in 1999. And if you look at, Atal Bihari Vajpayee had given actually importance to diaspora more to the earlier Prime Minister. He made amendment to the Citizenship Act. So there was a Citizenship Amendment Act 2023 that provided dual citizenship. A dual citizenship was available to, or is available to, Indian diaspora, right? Prime Minister Vajpayee also started celebrating Pravasi Bharati Divas, right? And then thereafter, Pravasi Bharati Divas is being celebrated. And the later Prime Minister Manmohan Singh followed the same policy. Now look at the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi, right? He called diaspora as India's Rashtradoot, right? So wherever he goes, he interacts with diaspora, right? Beginning from the Medicine Square addresses in 2014, when Modi ji addressed 20,000 Indian people in US, and then thereafter, if you look at wherever he goes, he addresses Indian diaspora, whether it is Germany or UK, or if you look at Malaysia, or recent visit to African countries, if you see, right? So diaspora has become very important part of Modi's doctrine, I can say. Now if you look at the political significance, right, or significance in India's foreign policy, I already discussed. The diaspora makes very significant for India politically, right? Indian diaspora has actually changed the mindset of the power elite of different countries. I had given you example that look at Indian US nuclear deal, where Indian diaspora played a vital role. I told you that Indian diaspora actually reached to the highest level of several countries, including UK, where Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. Now look at, Kamala Harris. Then if you look at the Mauritius or Fiji, right, and other country where Indians actually achieved good position in that country. Now if you look at, right? So that is a political significance of Indian diaspora in India's foreign policy, right? Now look at the another, right? The economic, look at investment, trade, look at remittance. India is a country who receives highest remittance in the world, 3.5% of India's GDP. Now, if you look at several part of India, like Punjab, like Kerala, has become prosperous because of the remittance that is coming from outside, right? Now, if you look at third is culture. Now, I told you that Modi calls Indian diaspora as a brand ambassador, and if you look at Indian culture like art, dance, sculpture, music, right, tabla, and others, right, is propagating in India. Yoga, right. Now, if you look at the ICCR, Indian Council of Cultural Relations, it is propagating India's soft power through diaspora, right. It actually, starts new program like No Bharat, No India program, right? Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. These all programs are very important to export India's soft power, and this is happening through the help of Indian diaspora. Now, next, I talked about the challenges that Indian diaspora is facing, and I talked about what the challenges of Indian diaspora facing basically. So, I talked about heterogeneity in the US, in UK. There are diaspora who are well with economy and politics, but if you look at the Western Asia, where we have low income group diaspora, right, which demands welfare from India, right. Now then I talked about that. Look at Indian diaspora also faces violence in different part of the world, right. Now then I talked about the lack of uniform diaspora policy we have, and then I talked about the standing committee report, right, on Indian diaspora led by Sasi Tharoor. With this, I'll end here and see you next time.